Hey, Walter Sorrells back with another Knife Makers Friday 5. I'll be catching you up on some stuff in the shop, some upcoming things, and mostly talking about this little tool that I just introduced called the Sorrels Brick. So for those of you who missed it, and I'll link to this video, a couple weeks ago I did a video about this new tool of mine called the Sorrels Brick that you can pick up on Sorrels Tool, which is my new website, different from Tactics Armory and Walter Sorrells blades, which are still out there. Anyway, I did an introductory sale of this new tool and I sold out in 6 hours. I was a little taken aback by it. So I took some pre-orders, I capped those pre-orders, sold that out in another few days. So I'm now cranking up the CNC machine to do that set of pre-orders. But just to let you guys know, if you tried to get in on that pre-order and you got to the website and found that it wasn't taking any more orders, that's because I capped it for that first set. Those will be delivered sometime in the next probably 2 weeks, middle of August. I'll be taking a new set of pre-orders, all at this introductory price, and those will be delivered sometime toward the end of the month, hopefully. Anyway, like I said, I was really just kind of shocked at how quickly this thing caught on. And so, you know, obviously I want to get as many out there in people's hands as I can. It's a tool that I use in my own shop and I really think is pretty cool. So I'm going to share at the end of this video a few little tips and tricks. People have asked me a lot of questions about it, and so I'll answer some of those questions at the end of the video. Okay, upcoming videos, let's see. So I'll probably do something about the brick itself, how I designed it, and that whole process. For those of you who are interested in making tools for yourself, you might pick up a few little hints there. Also, once I get this production kind of stabilized, so I've got some in stock and I feel like I can ship them out the minute people order them, then I will do a whole this is how I use it, just a kind of full review of how it's used and what I do with it and all that stuff. So wait for that. Probably it's going to be at least the end of the month because I'm really just going at it hard trying to get all these orders filled and out the door. Okay, so another couple of related videos that is related to each other. I'm going to do a video. I recently got a whip attachment for my Ameribrade grinder. The guys at Ameribrade call it whip. That stands for waterfall integral plunge. So it does kind of three things. If you're familiar with waterfall attachments, it's a waterfall attachment, but it's also intended for doing plunge lines and for integral bolster knives. All of those are kind of related, and you'll see how that works if you watch that video. Also, to that end, I'll be doing a video about making an integral bolster chef's knife. That's a really fun process. That's not the kind of knife that I typically make, so it'll be a little adventure for me, and hopefully if you tag along, you'll see some things that I've learned, and maybe you can avoid some mistakes that I made. Let me jump in here and mention that if you've enjoyed all my YouTube videos like this one, as you pursue the amazing hobby of knife making, well, maybe you ought to think about giving back to the channel. Easy to do. Jump on over to Patreon and help us out. Patreon.com/Walter Sorrells. Okay, so one kind of quick thing, you know, I've made this sort of left turn in my business model, I guess you'd say. I've been a knife maker for 25 years, but in recent years, I've started making more and more tools for knife makers. That's been a lot of fun for me. It's been very rewarding, and there seems to be a lot of interest in it. And so I'm going to be pushing that further as, you know, in the coming months, coming years, I think. To that end, I'm going to need some help doing it, and so I'm going to be hiring one or maybe two people in the near future. I will say I'm just looking for local guys who are interested in doing some part-time work. This is something that I'm just feeling my way into. So in the past, you know, occasionally I've had people contact me from far-flung places who wanted to come move to where I am and apprentice to me and all that. That's not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for, like I said, for some local guys with some hands-on type skills. If you got CNC interests, especially like students, there's a there are community colleges around here where kids are, learn how to do CNC work and that sort of thing. That would be an ideal thing, I think, in this particular case, where somebody wants to make a little money on the side, pick up some skills that'll help them down the line, but they don't want a full-time job. So if you're interested in that, contact me. Contact me through any of my websites, any of them, Sorrells Tool, Tactics Armory, Walter Sorrells Blades. You can find the links down in the description if you're interested in contacting me about doing a little, part-time work, especially CNC, but also some other stuff around the shop. Some knife making, and then just a lot of things that are associated with making tools, assembly, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I'll tell you about it if you get in contact with me. Okay, so last thing, I'm going to do a quick little demo of the Sorrels Brick here and answer some questions about it. So first, just to give you a brief explanation, a little more explanation. Like I said, this is just a 4-angle jig. It has 4 angles ground into it, milled into it. And so there's a 7 degree, 5 degree, 4 degree, 3 degree. Put it on the table, grind away just like any typical grinding jig. I'm not going to talk about all the advantages and disadvantages of this, but basically it's a very steady, stable rest for your knife, and because it's not adjustable, it's cheaper to make than these very complicated, often very complicated grinding jigs that have infinite variability. So anyway, check that other video if you want more details. I'll show you a couple things about grinding it first, but let me answer a couple questions. The first question is, there are 2 ways of describing angles of the grind angle on a knife. One is the included angle, which is the full angle that the bevel takes between the 2 bevels. And the other way is the angle off the axis. I always describe the angles that I'm grinding off axis. So if you imagine a straight line drawn straight down through your knife, how many degrees is that bevel off of that angle? These are both legitimate ways of describing the angle of a bevel. I just happen to prefer the off-axis approach, and that's what I used here. So 3 degrees on here means actually a 6 degree included angle, 4 degrees is 8 degree included angle, 10 and 14. Steve Tiedman sent me a note, and his question was basically this. He said he makes a lot of knives that are, say, 3/4 of an inch wide. So what he anticipated, correctly as it happens, is that if you have a small enough, thin enough blade, you can actually make it so that you're going to grind into the top of the jig here and eventually throw off that angle, because you're resting that angle on here, and if you grind the jig, it just screws it up. So is that possible? Yes, it is. But a 3/4 inch on the thinner angles, the 3, the 4, and the 5, you can easily put a 3/4 inch wide blade, 1/8 inch thick, and not grind this. Once you start getting up to the 7, though, it's going to be easier to hit that thing. So is there a fix to that? Yes. If you wanted to use this jig and use it with very, very thin blades, like say folders and stuff like that, the solution is to just glue a little piece, an extender here. So you can just glue a piece of wood or a piece of metal to extend this shelf up, so that instead of resting on the bottom here, it's going to rest higher up. So there's no chance of you grinding through into the jig. Had another question from a guy in Australia who was asking if you could screw 2 of these together, or, the basic question that he was asking is, can you make this thing longer? There are a couple points to be made there. One is, you can do knives that are quite a bit longer than this all you have to do is hang one end off of it, because you're only supporting it really right here and then however far into the blade that your grind line goes. It's basically 6 inches long, so you might think, oh, it can only do a 6-inch knife. Not at all. You can really do probably up to about a 10-inch knife, 12-inch knife, so you can put a pretty good sized knife on here. However, there is some limit. This is not made for making chef's knives. This is really made more for medium-sized knives and smallish knives. I had somebody ask about, making he felt like this was going to be a little small for a medium-sized, by his standards, like a 10 or 11-inch knife. It's really not. You can easily do a 10-inch knife on here, and there's no problem with it. Because like I said, you can just hang that end off and there's no problem there. So anyway, the broader point there though is, is this all things to all people? No, it's not. It's limited to certain size knives. And basically the kind of typical size knives that most stock removal guys make will fit on here just fine. But chef's knives, camp knives, big old huge knives, are not really made for this. So my intention in some number of months, and I don't know exactly how long that's going to be, is to make a bigger one that's got some different angles. I'll probably do a chef's knife one first. It'll be a little longer and it'll have shallower angles. So that's really key in doing chef's knives, because you've got big, high, shallow grinds on chef's knives. Also, I may eventually make one that's bigger, that's more made for big old thick camp knives and stuff like that, but that's not super high on my list of priorities right now. Oh yeah, I did have one other question, which is, can I ship internationally? Right now I don't have an option for that on the Sorrells Tool website. Man, I tell you, I was shipping knives internationally for a long time, and it didn't used to be that big a hassle. This is not a knife, I know, but I eventually started running into all kinds of problems shipping stuff internationally, even stuff that was pretty benign, knife sheaths and stuff like that. So anyway, right now I'm not going to ship these internationally. Hopefully in a few months I will. There's just a lot of problems with shipping stuff internationally. One is just it takes a long time, and what happens is about every third order I get some guy from Croatia or whatever contacting me and saying, hey, I never got my whatever it was that I ordered. Where is it? And then we have to go back and forth looking for it. It eventually always shows up, which really sucks, because I know that a lot of people internationally have a harder time getting their hands on really good knife making tools, and that sucks. That's a drag. But anyway, it's just kind of the reality, the world we're living in. And so for now, I'm just selling this in the US. Hopefully should be going international reasonably soon, but not quite yet. Okay, so now I'll give a quick demo here just for people who haven't seen this in the previous video, and maybe a couple little tips and tricks about how to get the most out of it. Okay, so the first point is pretty crucial here. If you care exactly what this angle is, 4 degrees, 3 degrees, whatever, and personally, that's not a super big issue. Is it 4.15 or 3? I don't really care. I just want it to be repeatable. That's the most important thing for me. But it's only repeatable if your table is in the right place. So anytime you use any jig, but particularly this one that's fixed, you always want to check that table, take a machinist square, and make sure that it's dead square. And I always, I measure it off the platen itself, not with the belt on there. So this is a matter of personal preference. But as a general rule, I like higher grinds than lower grinds. There are a lot of people that grind super short grinds, and I guess the theory is that it makes for a stronger knife. I personally would always bias myself towards a higher grind, thinner grind, something that's going to cut well. The first job of this thing is always going to be to cut, not to stab, you know, car doors or pry open refrigerators or something. You're looking for a cutting tool, and so I want to grind fairly high. So if you don't know exactly which angle that you're going to use, it's prudent to start at a higher angle than you think you need. For 1/8 inch blades, I like to start at 5 degrees. I think that's a good place to start. Typically, a 5-degree grind will give me something that looks kind of like this. In other words, it goes up towards the spine, but it doesn't get all the way up there. And there are reasons why I do that on production knives. If I'm doing a custom knife, I'm probably going to grind it up a little bit higher than I would on a production knife. And anyway, I won't get into the reasons for that, but that's the reality. So what I'll typically do, if I'm not sure which angle I want to use, is I'll start high. So in this case, I'll start with a 5-degree angle. Grind a little bit and take a look at it. If it doesn't look like it's doing anything too crazy, then go ahead and start grinding, grind up a good way. And you grind a little bit, you find out what's going on, and then you can adjust accordingly and move back to, let's say you started at 5. You say, okay, that's not quite going to get me where I want it. I want it to grind real high up the blade. Try it over on 4. And then you can grind away and see how that works for you. And if that doesn't quite get you there, then you can always go up to 3. If you start in the other direction and you over grind and you start grinding holes into the spine, there's no way of fixing it, at least not a convenient way. So first suggestion, always start at a higher degree than you think you need. In other words, if you think it's going to be 5, start at 7. Another tip, and this is a personal preference kind of thing, I always hang the tip off. We talked about grinding the jig. If you keep it here and grind all the way to the tip, you will always grind the jig. I should have mentioned that. You always want to hang the tip off just a little bit. And usually hanging it off by 3/4 of an inch or something like that is fine. You don't want to hang 6 inches off of there. If you can avoid it, it'll work, but if you really start laying into it, it's gonna bend the knife and start grinding in ways you don't want it to. So for me, I always like about 3/4 of an inch, but it's gonna depend on the size of your knife and how wide it is and all that. If you're grinding something nice and wide, maybe 1.5 inches wide, you won't need to hang much of it off of there at all. Okay, another thing, should you support it on the jig? If you want to, just throw a welding clamp on there. If you want to be super secure, put a C-clamp on there. I personally like to flip my knife back and forth a lot as I go. I'm always trying to make sure my symmetry's good. And you know, one of the difficulties of using an adjustable jig that has, you know, all kinds of fasteners on it and stuff like that, and you know, they work different ways, but it's pretty typical to have clamps or some kind of support mechanism on here that involves fasteners that have to be screwed down. What that means is you can't flip it back and forth easily, and to me that's actually one of the biggest advantages of this. When I'm grinding, I'm going to be flipping back and forth. And to me, that improves your grinding. I'm a big believer that you don't want to do anything on a knife all the way in isolation from other parts of the knife. In other words, if I'm grinding the outline of a blade, I don't want to grind the handle and just grind the handle and leave the blade completely to the end, or vice versa. If I'm grinding bevels, I want to go back and forth. your biggest friend in knife making is this right here, your eyeball. So anytime you're looking, that's an opportunity to make a correction. Anytime you're not looking, that's an opportunity to screw something up, get things out of symmetry, get things out of alignment. And you know, to me, that's one of the big advantages of this, is just allowing you to flip it back and forth. And so I don't use any clamp on here at all. When I first started using it, I used welder's clamps, C-clamps a couple times, but I've found that it's nice and steady and secure on here as long as you're careful to make sure that you get it all the way down on that little ledge. And you can just go back and forth to your heart's content. So one last point I'd make about jigs generally, and that includes this, but any jig that you might go out and buy, a jig is not a universal solution to turn somebody who's just starting to make knives into a perfect knife maker. Grinding bevels is hands down the hardest part of making knives. It just is. It's a high skill thing. Even if you have a jig, there's some skill involved. So what I would encourage people to do is don't push super hard. I give lessons to folks, you know, on a regular basis. Almost invariably, people smash too hard into the grinder. And what that does is it creates all kinds of inconsistencies in the grind line. You get wobbles and wiggles and all kinds of stuff. If you go fairly softly, you'll be able to even things out and get nice even grind lines and get nice flats. And you can actually use this on a grinding wheel too. So this will work for grinding hollow grinds too. The principle is the same. Just get it on there nice and gently and then put a little more pressure on as you go. All right, well, I could ramble on with this ad nauseum, but I'm gonna wrap it up there. Like I said, should be shipping pre-orders in the first set of pre-orders in the next week or so, and then I should be shipping the second set of pre-orders in towards the end of August. So I'm working on them right now and should have them in your hands pretty soon. All right, guys, thanks for watching and keep on making those knives. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.